finish where I started, on the east bank of the Dnipro. All of us who enjoy the comfort and freedom that democracy brings owe those fighting men and women a debt we will never be able to repay. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you. We now move to the open debate. I call first Keith Brown, to be followed by Sharon Dowie. Around 4 minutes. Mr Brown.
Thank you, President Officer. It's 2 years, as has been mentioned, since the invasion began, and much of the talk about the invasion in the media now, particularly in the light of other world events, is about war fatigue. The idea that public willingness to support Ukraine in the West is somehow beginning to slow down, and I hope that's not the case, and today is a chance for us to show that here in Scotland that's not the case. We need to show that we want to reiterate our commitment as a nation to supporting the independence of Ukraine, firstly on its own merits, but also in order to protect human life. And it's absolutely right that this motion states that clearly. And just to say, in relation to unity and consensus, I regret the fact there are comments in the amendments which are critical of the situation, given the points I've made in terms of how slow the UK was to open its borders, the fact that support's been taken away from local authorities, and the fact that Scotland's managed to accommodate around 20% of all Ukrainians. And I think if we're going to try and make wider points, as has been suggested, that undermines the ability to have a consensual approach. I think while we may feel powerless in the face of these huge events, there is, of course, action that we can take as individuals, as Alec Cole-Hamilton has mentioned. For my part, I did take in a Ukrainian family. I thought I would end up with an older gentleman, too old to serve in the war, but in fact ended up with a family, 2 children and a dog. And had them in my home for a number of months this year. But we managed over the period of that time to find both new accommodation and employment for them, which is very commendable. I know also that in school the children of the family received one-to-one English lessons, which was necessary. And also the family themselves undertook language lessons. And it was interesting to have them come back and ask me about the meanings of the words like drukit, Drich, both of which he seemed to master, but could not get quite the meaning of nae bother until we explained it. But they were given some Scots language teaching as well. In October last year, in my constituency, the Ukrainian Refugees organised a fair as part of their celebrations of Ukrainian Cossack Day. And though I can't speak for every Ukrainian refugee in Scotland, it's my view that most of them have received a very warm Scottish welcome, with Scotland taking in 26,200 displaced Ukrainians, the most of any UK nation. I think that is worthy of comment and commendation. However, for those who choose to continue to make Scotland their home, we must turn that into a warm Scottish future. And the policy position paper recognises the need to work across the different layers of government. Many members have mentioned Edinburgh. In my own area, a small council, Clackmannshire Council, won an award last year for its refugee integration scheme. So this is the right approach to take. And the same approach now needs to be taken by the UK Government, and they have to give clarity on what happens when the 3-year visa period available to Ukrainian refugees comes to an end. Paul O'Kane mentioned this, but if I could just mention a text I got from my constituent, now rehoused, who has the opportunity to move into social housing. Paul O'Kane rightly said we should hear the voices of Ukrainians. And he mentions that they went last week to view social housing that was offered to them, that was half the price of the accommodation they're currently in. But they have to say when they accept it within a day. It's a 3-bedroom, 3-floor monthly, a monthly fee for half of what they currently pay. But it requires complete renovation, painting and carpeting on the floor. And all this work must be done before they can give them the 15 months before the rent freeze starts. They also have to buy a freezer, washing machine and cooking stove, etc. Now, this is difficult in any event, but to do this without knowing whether in a year's time you're still going to have the right to stay in the country is virtually impossible. And the same inhibition lies on the Scottish Government. How can they be asked to make long-term plans if we do not have the security of those that are currently here having the right to stay, the reassurance to understand the trauma they've gone through in the first place, and to compound that trauma by not letting them know that they'll be safe to stay here if that's what they require and want to do. The uncertainty, I know, is causing distress for Ukrainians. It's preventing local authorities and third sector organisations like Forth Valley Welcome in my constituency from adequately planning services, as they don't know how long people will be able to stay in Scotland, or if there's a risk of displaced people being made destitute under UK rules. So I would urge the UK Government to step up to support Ukrainian refugees, as the people of Scotland have done. And colleagues, by supporting this motion, we can show that Scotland and all the political parties in it remain committed to Ukrainian independence and supporting Ukrainian lives, whether they are here in Scotland or in Ukraine. So I'd urge everyone to support the motion in the Cabinet Secretary's name.
Thank you very much, Mr Brown. Just to advise the Chamber, the time we had in hand has pretty much been exhausted, so